Hello, welcome to the February 10th, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'll be hosting the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field, or you could submit questions in advance by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that as the live stream goes on, I won't be able to answer questions in a real-time manner, so I may be 20 to 30 minutes behind a live question. So we'll try to go through each of the questions chronologically, and if you don't get an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same question over and over again, that would just enable me to answer more questions throughout the live stream. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you are running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, Pro, if it's version 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, that information is helpful, as well as which operating system you're currently using. And we should have all of the topics and all the questions indexed with timestamps that will be pinned to the top of the comments field. So you could just kind of look there. And if you wanted to search for topics that may have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to create that website. It's a wonderful resource where you can access over 24,000 questions. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude that serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just wanted to make the live streams a better community. So, and give special thanks to them for their efforts. And also another wonderful resource of information to Steinberg users is the Cubase Nation Discord. And Jazz Dude does a lot of work compiling information for that. So special thanks to him. And also, just I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. And I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you are watching the live stream, please feel free to introduce yourself if you're watching live, or even if you're watching it on replay. So let's go ahead and get started. So you see a question from Ace Amadeus. Hi, Greg. Hope you are well. In Cubase 12, how to copy a project and keep my VSTs, effects, and project set up, but I want a new audio pool. I don't want it to be accessing old projects audio folder. Thanks. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. One is if you want it to go to a new project. We could come over here. Let's create a new project. And let's say I had this project here, Amos Moses. And let's say I wanted to kind of take everything from that project without the content. We could come over and go to Import. And we'll say Tracks from Project. So we will say, I'm just going to go over to my particular projects over here. Let me just okay, so now that we have this selected, we could choose to import all of the tracks but not import the events and parts, and we could also choose to not import the automation. So now when I hit OK, and we could have these go to matching tracks or create new tracks if necessary. So if you're importing it in, so I could just at that point come over and have all of my settings automatically configured over without any of the media. You could also choose to, if you go to your pool, if you go to your media menu and go to pool window, like if you throw away all the files and then at that point just come over and remove unused media, and then you could save as, and then you could save it as a template to start or save it as a start off project. And then if you save it as a template, that will decouple it from the particular audio folder. So when you go to a new project, we'll say, okay, let's come over here to this template, and we'll say create. And by default, it'll ask you to prompt for a project location since version 11. And then you could just say, okay, I want to choose this folder, and that folder would be, ideally kind of a brand new folder, so that we could just open it up, and then none of the media will be accessed directly in that particular folder. So when we go to our pool window, there's no, if you saved it without the particular audio files, you can just simply have it without audio files present in there. So a couple ways of approaching it, Ace. All right, so we have a question from Cutler Station. Says, excited for today's broadcast. Is there a way to flag or rename a lane while recording? I'd like to flag a take I love, but maybe the artist wants to keep trying. Would love a way to flag one. So let's go ahead and give it a try. So let's say if I was doing a quick recording here on a track. All right, so I'm not sure if it's like a real-time cycle mode. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up lanes, and let's say I'll just hit record. We'll arm this track. So I'm going to just hit record. All right, and now as we open up and make the lanes taller here, I'm just going to make my lanes bigger so we could see these a little more obvious. Okay, so if I'm not doing cycle record and I record multiple passes, so I could just come here, and every time that we record, so we'll just do this. It's going to end up in kind of a new lane. So if I say, okay, I think this is the good one, we were saying, yeah, that might be perfect, I would just go to the description and type in something like this one. So let's come over here. And then you go, I think I got one more good one in me. We can now just come over here and say, okay, let's say they made a mistake. And as we add our different lanes, I would maybe just type in within the description field, and you could even do this like while it's recording. So we'll say no way on that take. So now we could just go back, and as you look at your different takes, you could see the descriptor here. If you don't see the descriptor, it may not be enabled by default, but if you go all the way over to the right, you could now just come over here and activate and make sure the descriptor is in there. So anytime that you would select event, and I think that we could even do this while it's in cycle record, but we'll test just to make sure. So I'll just put this in cycle. Now, as we do cycle record, it's actually kind of one particular file. So let's say I like this one. So if it's in cycle record, you may have to stop and then just simply type a description in. So let me know if that will work for you, Cutler Station. All right, we see Patrick, who's happy to be live. All right, so another question from Ace. Just says, hi, Greg. If we get a Yamaha MG10XU, can that replace old UR22 and Cubase 12 for studio recording? Also, we are trying to get old hardware modules to work along with Steinberg VSTs. Thanks. So, the MG10XU does have a USB audio output, but realize that I don't, I'm not sure if there's a way, so you may, so that will allow you to incorporate other elements. I used to have one, but make sure that there's a way that, particular channels aren't always being sent out to the USB. So, I don't think you really gain too much other than it's a mixer, but I mean, you do have a mixer with it. So, you could use it for recording. Lots of people do. And then you could plug in your hardware modules, check just to make sure. And I know that the manual is online, but to make sure that it doesn't always record everything that's going out from the mixer. So if you have like a hardware module and you're recording a vocal, you don't necessarily want to record the audio of the vocal and a hardware module on the same within the same track. So make sure that there's a way to defeat the signal going out of the USB port. All right, so you see Ace says, hope all you Cubase users are frosting well thanks to these live streams. He's learned a lot, so that's great. And we have Jason Sykes checking in from South Shields, England. Thanks for joining us. We see Jan from Cubase Index checking in from Stockholm. All right, we have Benny checking in from Sweden. All right, so we have Dallas LaRue. Okay, so Dallas asks, why is it when I render and place 8 drum tracks at the same time, some automatically come up in musical mode and others do not? So I'm not sure if it's Midi or audio that you're rendering in place, but let's go ahead and give it a try. I'll try Midi first. All right, so let's say I want it. I'll just play back a particular pattern here. Okay, so let's say, and I'm just going to route some of these to outputs. Okay, so let's say, so I'm going to just drag this pattern over. And so we have these being routed out to different outputs. All right, so let's say, okay, so my audio track or my MIDI track that I'm rendering from is in musical mode. So let's go ahead and render this in place. Let's choose our channel settings. All right, so as we look at this, none of them are in musical mode. Just want to get down to, so all the rendered files here are in musical mode. Let's say if we wanted to try this, like taking multiple files, multiple audio files, like for drums here, and bounce it down to see if that makes a difference. So let's say these files are currently in musical mode. So I want to take my drum tracks here and we'll take all of these out of musical mode. And let's say I want to just do a quick render in place of all of these drum parts. So we'll come over here, do a quick render in place. All right, so now when we look at the files there, so it doesn't seem like they are in musical mode at all. So let me know, Dallas, if you're doing audio or Midi, but it seems to be consistent. So it doesn't seem to automatically place it into musical mode. But let me know if I did it differently than you did. All right. All right, wonderful to see you guys again. And Jeweler DeRocket on. All right, so we see Orlando Medina says Pad Shop no reconoce presets. So my high school Spanish serves me well. I guess it's Pad Shop doesn't remember presets. So I'll just jump to a different project here. So let's say if we wanted to come over here, let's say we'll open up an instance of Pad Shop. All right, so let's say so I'm not sure so we should see all the presets that are available here. So if you just kind of double click, so see if you see like all of your different presets that are available here. So I'm not sure if it's like the factory presets or so that should come. And if you don't see the factory presets and you've installed it, go to Media Bay and then you could just go to factory content. And then I think, or go to VST Sound, I think. And let's go scroll down to Pad Shop content and right click and, rescan the discs. So you could look directly here and rescan discs. Now, if it is a user preset, so let's say you come in. So let's say, okay, now I want to save this as a preset. So we'll call it February 10th. Now, where a user preset is accessed, so if you wanted to just if you're looking for it in Media Bay, you could come over here to user presets, and then you'll see VST instrument presets. So you can say, okay, when we look at this, here's our February 10th preset. And if we wanted to look, so if I drag this to a different track, I could just say, okay, now it's going to load up Pad Shop with that particular preset. So we go to look at it. And then if you wanted to just kind of look directly inside of here, you could see the preset just listed amongst all the other presets. So let me know if it's a user preset or maybe a factory thing, but either of those solutions should help, or if I totally misunderstood the question. So, all right, wonderful to see Peter checking in from Montreal. Marie Starr says, please, I need to know what to do to audio dropouts. So one of the things you could do the first thing to always do is to come over here and go to your studio menu to studio setup, and let's select your audio interface and try increasing the buffer size. So that will make it an easier strain on your computer. So now it could also be caused by different plugins. So if you have plugins like in your master bus, which a lot of people do, kind of, let's say if you have different limiters and different aspects like that, it could be that these particular plugins are taking up too much CPU at the particular buffer size that you're using. Now, if it's plugin related, one of the things you could do is go to the lower left-hand corner, and this could, if you enable the constrained delay compensation, this could automatically basically turn off the plugins that could cause a lot of latency on your system. And generally, the plugins that cause more latency are more CPU intensive. So I would try to raise the buffer and come over and, maybe if enable constrained delay compensation. Now, sometimes it could be like a component. Often video drivers, NVIDIA video drivers, you didn't indicate which platform you're on. But you could run a little utility called from Resplendence called Latency Mon, MON, and that could point out to see if you have like a hardware component that's causing interrupts or that could result in dropouts on your system. All right, so we have Clayton Workman checking in from North Carolina. Glad you can make it today. We have the Heartbreak Time Machine as well. All right, so we see Cubase Pro 12. How do I assign 32 audio interface inputs to 32 channels of Cubase tracks without having to assign them all manually? So let's say, I think if we do it from our mixer, we'll come over. I'll add a number. I'll just do a new project here. Just do an empty project, sorry. So we'll add 32 tracks. Okay, so I'm going to get 32 mono. Okay, and I'm going to add 32. All right, so let's say I have 16 mono inputs here. So I think that if we, and the concept will be the same. So let's say I'll take these first 16. And then if we hold down like shift and select, we can see that. So hold down, select the channels, and then hold down the shift key, and you can see that it's mono in 1, mono in 2, mono in 3, mono in 4, all the way through 16. So if I wanted them to all be the same, I think we'd hold down like Alt or Option plus Shift, and I'll say no bus. So now all these will be set to no bus for our audio inputs. And if I want to take 1 through 16 here, select them and say, I want to so hold down Shift and select like the first input for the top selected track. And now we'll see mono in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, if you're looking right here. And that will route sequentially all of your inputs. And so you don't have to do it one by one, which is cool if you get paid by the hour. But very easy to do, Kyle. All right. Wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. How do you make it so that each time you click on MIDI clips, the editor highlights only the notes inside that clip and not empty spaces between, so you won't have to zoom in and out? Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so All right, so let's say I have a MIDI event here. So now when I double click, there's two different modes, especially if you're doing it kind of, so when you double click on the events, that will open up the event, and we could have these synchronized if you wanted to as well. So if I come over here, double click on this particular event, this MIDI event, if we go, you'll see like this little timeline here, and that will synchronize the lower zone editor from this window. So if I wanted to now scroll over and double click on this event, we could just have that automatically go directly to where the event is. So, but if this is set to be synchronized, that event may be kind of tied to the time. So if I double click here on event, and let's say I scroll, and let me just zoom here. So you can see where my playhead is, and then if I double click again, we could just see exactly. So maybe, if it's not kind of behaving, so now if I just double click on a particular event here, that will kind of take it to the beginning of the event in the lower zone editor. So that will kind of make it there, or you could have the views synchronized so that when you zoom in on one, that both will zoom kind of in sync. So maybe try to turn off the linking the project and lower editors. Let me know if that helps. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. It's a cold, windy day there. And we have John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin as well. Heartbreak Time Machine says, lanes are so powerful, I still forget to use them. All right, so we see from Jeweler to Rocket, question, how you approach stereo mix widening, how much is too wide and how much is tight, how to know when it's enough widening for a mix. So if I was doing maybe more of a traditional mix, let me just find a project here. So a lot of times you could kind of use different elements within the mix to pan. Anytime that you kind of do different stereo enhancers or wideners, there is, the possibility of having, different elements maybe, have phasing issues, because that's what it's kind of manipulating. So if I want to take this and maybe make it sound a little wider. So one of the ones I like is the Imager plugin that comes with it, because you could have different frequency ranges. So instead of just having, if I wanted to make the bass more narrow, so this way we could have different frequency ranges. Now let's say if we went too far, probably one way I would check, if you go to the Cubase control room, still make sure that if you click on the mono down mix, that you're not losing stuff, because I realize that a lot of people are going to be listening to it on mono sources, like their phones, older iPads, tablets. So a lot of people, if you go way too far,
Even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago.
So, check like a mono down mix, and I would use that as like a control to see if once you're doing that, if you're kind of losing a lot of different elements. But, try to make elements within the mix wider, like, through panning as opposed to kind of like spatialization manipulation. So if you have the option to. All right, so we see from Esteban Carlos Benson, your grid time shows the option for beat. However, I don't see that option listed in my grid time. Can you demonstrate how we can enable the beat option? So when you see this, I can see grid to beat. So it really depends on what your master time format is. So if I right click on my master time and switch it to seconds, we notice that now it's my grid changes to intervals of a second. If I switch my timeline here and it's just right clicking, and we have this set to time code, now I could have, everything represented in frames. So right click and select bars and beats at the top, and then you'll see because everything is in sample accurate. Everything is sample accurate, and we just have different representations of time. So here we can say, okay, now I can see bars and beats. I can see seconds. So when I switch to time format, then we have different grid values that are based upon that time format. So try just right clicking, and then you can have it snap to bar and stuff like that. All right, we see John Costigan says, thanks much for the clear instruction on reamping. It produced textbook results. And that was a question, I think, from Tuesday's live stream. So thanks for letting me know. And yeah, so that's great. And I'm just curious if you had any phase problems at all, or if just kind of laid in right. So maybe let me know. Just my own curiosity. I haven't reamped anything in years. I used to always do it with guitar players and record a dry track through a direct box, and I would tell them it was often for impedance to confuse them, so I could run it through like a Sans amp or something without them realizing it. So, all right, and we have Sir N68 Soren in Sweden. Glad you could join us today. All right, and we see Polly D. Greetings from Scottsdale, Arizona. It's a beautiful part of Arizona. Thanks for joining us today. John Barry is saying hi from England. Thanks for joining, being part of the live stream. All right, and Paulie D just says, Greg, comment, not a question. Found a very cool Steinberg feature. I can edit a small section of a file in Wavelab. Then when done, drag that event right into a Cubase audio track. Nice. Yeah, there's lots of great kind of back and forth stuff where you could, one of the cool things, if you're in Cubase, we could just say, go to your audio menu and say edit in Wavelab, do any particular changes we need there, and then update it, and it's automatically updated directly back into Cubase. So, but glad you found that. All right, so we see a question. How do you switch between the quantization highlighted inside or outside of editors? Say you recorded eighth notes and you want to align them to triplets inside the Midi clip or the project view. Okay, so let me just jump back to different project. Okay, so let's say now I have a series of eighth notes. I'll just kind of enter in. Okay, so we have eighth notes here. So if I'm in the main project window, we could see our quantized values. So we'll see, eighth notes, eighth note triplets, dotted eighths. So if I say eighth note triplets and I hit Or let's say I'll do quarter note triplets here, and I hit Q. The notes will will quantize based on what is selected. If I wanted to do this within the editor itself, then we can see that when I switch the quantized value, we can see quarter note triplet here or quarter note triplet here. So if I change this to eighth note triplets, we'll see that the same quantization value is applied. So let's say we'll jump back to quarter triplet. And now all we'd have to do is, and let's say if we had other notes, if I only wanted, if I just hold down Shift and double click, I could only select those particular drums and then hit the letter Q. And then that way it's going to quantize only this drum, but not other drums. So whether you're inside or outside the editor, really the process is the same. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button, so that's how we can continue to do these live streams with wonderful viewership, and hitting the like button. It's always great, wonderful. So thank you, Michael, for the reminder. All right, wonderful to have the Monk Beats back. Great to see you on the live stream again. He's sending greetings from Italy. All right, so if the Monk Beats asks, sorry, my chat field. Okay, so we see, let me see if this is the right one. Is there a way to save a track preset or effects chain settings for the output routing of a group track? As I recall, the track from the media bay has the output already routed. So let's just, so let's say if I have like all of my drums in this particular project routed to a group. So let's say I will take my drums here, and we're going to add a group channel to the selected channels. I'll make it stereo here. Okay, so now I'm going to select the group and all of the channels, and let's go to File, and let's go to Export Selected Tracks. So, and we'll just reference the media files. We can copy the media files if we want. I'm going to save them onto my desktop. We'll call it Monk Beats. Or I guess I should call it, Monk Beats. All right, so let's do a new project. And now what I want to do is import a track archive. So you export selected tracks and you import it as a track archive. All right, so we see the Monk Beats. So now I'll just come over here, hit OK. We'll select all. And now all of the routing, all the tracks with their routings are automatically preserved with the particular tracks. So if you wanted to preserve like routing to different groups and stuff like that, that's when I would use the track export selected tracks and import it as a track archive. All right, Ace Amadeus asks, hi Greg, could you please remind me how to import WAV files to Groove Agent and create custom drum patches, assign them a name so I can load them up in my drop-down menu? Thanks. All right, so let's come over here and we'll add an instrument track. We'll make it a Groove Agent SE. Groove Agent, the full version, will work the same way. So say, okay, I want to go to All right, so say I want a kick drum. Just drag it onto the pad, and that's really kind of all you have to do. So say, okay, now I want different snares. And, if you want toms, hi-hats, whatever you want. So just literally just kind of drag and drop from the project window or from the media bay, and then all you have to do is right click, and you could just come over here, and if you wanted to just or you could just come right over here and save a preset, and so we'll call it Ace. So at this point you could just come over and say, okay, I loaded up this kit. All right, and then I want to load a kit. And then once again, if you come over to like your media bay over here, so you could just see user presets, and then you'll see your VST instruments, and then you could just see Ace and just drag it over. And then as we do that, that will just automatically load up that particular kit for you, and that would be all you have to do. So, just, getting the files in is just literally drag and drop. All right, so the Muckbeaks question asks, please, Greg, can you discuss track archive and tracks from project, functionalities, differences, advantages? So we could think of the tracks from project as maybe being a more extensive version. So when we did like track archives, it's going to be, I think, for MIDI instrument, and I don't think it's going to include like arranger tracks, so it's going to be limited to kind of tracks that are more media. So I don't think it will include like tempo track information. Now when we use, so that was kind of like the first way of doing it, and then the capabilities in import tracks from projects were that we could choose to include or exclude the event. So if we only wanted the channel but not the events, so as you go to the import tracks, you also have you can particularly import to different specified locations, and you could also choose to exclude automation as well. So and if you wanted to merge like tracks that were done in one project that maybe have the same names, as you come over here, you could say, okay, I want to select all, but you could say select matching. So if you have the same tracks in different projects, and if the name is the same, so say, okay, this way, this track gets routed to the kick track or gets routed to a new track. So we could think of the import tracks from project as being maybe like the track archives on, but more flexibility, a bit more like on steroids, if you will. So more flexibility on what you want to include, exclude, where it's going to be going into. So if you want to go into the destination track or not. And also, the position of where the content is. So if you want to add the cursor, you want it at, the absolute position where it was previously. So that's what some of the differences between it. All right, so we have Thermonuclear War checking in from Eastern Europe in a cold Serbia. Thanks for joining us. And Tim Weinheimer, who's probably has much better temperature in Mission Viejo, California, would be my guess. All right, and we have Larry checking in from Brampton, Canada. Says thanks for the Yamaha MG10XU question. Very timely since he has one. All right, so we see question, is it possible to open the kits I built in Groove Agent with Groove Agent SE or inverted? So yeah, the kits that are created in one can be open. A kit created in Groove Agent SE could be opened in Groove Agent. Groove Agent could be opened in Groove Agent SE. The one difference can be that kits, if you created patterns for your kits in Groove Agent SE, you have a limit of 16 patterns. In the full Groove Agent, you could have 128 different patterns. So a lot of people aren't necessarily creating patterns when they do kits, but if you needed to go beyond 16, that wouldn't carry over. If you had 32 patterns in your kit, not samples, they could both load up, 32 different samples per 128 pads. But the number of patterns between the two could be different. So I think if you had, 32 patterns, only the first bank of 16 patterns would show up. So if you create a lot of patterns in a kit for Groove Agent, all the patterns may not load up into Groove Agent SE. But it's a minor thing, but that's really kind of the only little gotcha that could arise. But in general, yes. So. All right, so we see a question, how can I get more than 8 sends? Is it possible to have more than 8 effects channels and sends for your recommendation? So each track in Cubase will have 8 effect sends. So if we need it more, so let's say, okay, we'll come over here to our sends. I could create a group. So let's say I needed 12 effects and destinations. We'll add a stereo group. So I could take this track, send it to, 7 different destinations. So we'll come over here. Let's add an effects channel send. So let's add a delay. We'll come over, add a reverb. So let's say, okay, and let's send it to a group. All right. All right, so now if I needed, let's say I needed more destinations, I could just send this to a group, and then when we go to, group 2 or whatever, then on here I have another 8 sends. And then if I needed another 8 sends, I could send this send to another group, and on that group have their sends. And, unlike traditional hardware setups that would do something similar, there's all the latency is compensated for as it goes through the entire signal path. All right, so we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. All right, wonderful to see Dave Glick on the live stream. Enjoyed your Twin Peaks photo that you posted on Facebook. And from Colorado, I believe. All right, so we have Balsa says, hi, Greg, thanks for doing this. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. And he's checking in from Montenegro. All right, and Casey Dotson says hello. All right, so we see, hi, Greg, you showed how to duplicate, say, a course so it became shared copies on a track for easier editing. Can't find a key command to do this. Please, can you refresh my memory? So if it's a Midi part, so it works a little bit differently on Midi parts, so let's come to a Midi event. So there's a couple different ways of working with shared events. So let's say if I'm here, one of the ways you can do it is if you hit Control or Command plus the letter K, that'll open up the repeats, and you can say, okay, I want this to repeat, and then you could activate shared copies. So now If we move all these parts, we'll see them move in all of the different events. Another way to do it is if you hold down the Alt key and drag, and then hold down the Shift key. So Alt and Shift and drag, that will make shared copies. And you can see if an event is shared when you see like the little, almost like an equal sign in the upper right-hand corner. The easiest way to do it is if you go to the right edge and hold down the Shift key and drag it out, then we can make shared copies of that. If it's an audio event, we have to turn the event into a part. So we go to our audio and we'll say events to part. And now as I drag this out, I can make a change in one of the parts if I drag it out while holding down a Shift key. So now I could come over here and make a change to one part, and that would automatically. So if I wanted to do a fade in on that one part, adjust my clip gain. Let's do a fade out. I wanted to adjust my right edge, so we could see that could happen just for on audio events. So, but basically, for like a MIDI event, just come over here, and if you drag from the right edge, just hold down the Shift key or Control Command plus the letter K, and that will open up the repeat dialog box. All right, wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. All right, and we have Hobby Musiker Harpy. So he just typed his question in German. Sorry, I don't understand German, but I see something with latency. Maybe if someone could translate, if needed, maybe Jazz Duke could translate. Sorry, I don't understand German. All right, so he says Stefan Carlos Benson says, wow, thank you. So hope that makes sense. I think, we talked a little bit about it on a Facebook group as well. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me just. All right, so Balsa asks, hi Greg, is it possible to reset, remove all VariAudio pitch corrections from a project? I'm returning to a project that I know used VariAudio, but I don't know where, so I want a clean start. So let's say if we had VariAudio editing on a particular event like this, so let's say we have, one of the things you could do is, I think if you go to choose functions, so let's say if I come over here and I move notes around and I've adjusted, pitch. So I think if we go to functions, you could choose to reanalyze audio. So if you wanted to just come over here, I'll just make it into larger. But I think yeah, so if you just choose reanalyze audio, that will take it right back to where you were. So so just try, and again, it's under the functions menu. And then there is kind of like, if you select all the notes, there is a reset pitch changes for selection. So also from this little drop down functions menu right here. So give that a try. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Wolf Sarto just saying hi. Thanks for joining. All right, and wonderful to see Nick on. All right, so a question from Ritesh Gandhi. Hi, Greg. Is it possible to move the automations with the events/regions in case of change in the sample rate in the project window from 44.1 to 48K because it's not happening? Okay, so let's... just... I'll do a quick sample rate conversion in this project. All right, so right now we're at, and I'll just add some automation. So let's say we're starting around measure 17 through measure 33. So I'm going to select, let's go to my project setup, hit Shift plus S, or go to project setup from the project menu. I'm going to switch to sample rate here. All right, so we're going to convert. Let's keep. So we're doing our sample rate conversion, and here we're going to choose no to sample positions. So it looks like our automation is the same, and if I move the event, the automation is automatically tied with it. So if I move it out here, we can see the automation is moving with it after the sample rate conversion. So it seems to work on my end. So I'm not sure, so again, how I did the sample rate conversion for the project is go to the project setup and change the sample rate there. And generally, say yes to everything except for keep the audio at its sample positions, but that seems like it's working. I'll just reread the question, make sure. So, but let me know if I did it differently than you or if that's what you wanted to accomplish. I think it's what you asked for. All right, so we see from the Monk Beats, it says, thanks, Greg, trying to track archive solution, and it's perfect for my workflow. That's great. All right, so we see a question from Jay from Secret Studios. Thanks for walking through the normalization the other day. Today, I was wondering if you could do a step-by-step without using Project Logical Editor of selecting all audio events and cutting silent parts. And two, is there an easy way to give normalization peaks a margin between peaks, i.e. 20% normalized via RMS? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, so let's say if I have a number of files, and let's say I have kind of files that have silence within them. So I'm here, here, here. All right, and I'll just go duplicate this. All right. So let's say as we do this, I'm going to bounce these particular audio files together. Okay, so let's say this is now one contiguous audio file that obviously has gaps. So without using the Project Logical Editor, I would go to Audio, to Advanced, and choose Detect Silence. Here we could set a threshold. So we could analyze, and we could choose to strip silence. And then if I wanted to just come right over here, we'll process, and now it's automatically stripped the silence between the different events. So once again, just audio menu to advanced, and then just detect silence. All right, and the second part of the question, is there a way to give normalization peaks a margin between peaks, i.e. 20% normalized via RMS? So, if you wanted to, you could choose to normalize as we do this. So let's go to Audio, to Processes, and we'll go to Normalize. So generally normalizing is going to be, when we're dealing with dBs, is going to be based on peak. But you can do, like loudness units, so LUFS, loudness units, full scale. And we could think of this as being more along the lines of RMS. So I would maybe choose the loudness normalization as opposed to peak normalization. And again, that's just when you go to audio, and you can do this in the direct offline processing and see when you select normalize, or just come directly to audio to processes to normalize. And that will take you right here. So maybe normalize it by loudness as opposed to peaks. All right. So we see a question. Hey, Greg, having this issue whenever I'm trying to write some live automation on channel with the CC121, it randomly jumps to the previous track and starts automating there. So I would think that I'll just test it with my CC121 here real quick. So let's say we're on this. Okay, so I'm on this track.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry.
So whatever is selected, my CC121.
My way in your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you caught me too.
Now, if you accidentally, maybe if there's another controller,
Even now I'm so in love with you.
because realize that, why it's called a 121 is a one-to-one relationship. So it's going to be on a selected channel. So sometimes if you have a MIDI controller, maybe that's, being kind of sent to the wrong, that's maybe shifting it. That's the only thing I could think of, but, whatever channel is selected here. So I'm not sure if you're using, the channel selection buttons on the CC121, but let's say I do that. And let me just go ahead and fast forward here. So say, well, this is, and if I go up to my guitar track, and let's automate that.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us.
If I go down 2 tracks,
Look my way and your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you caught me too.
and just automate on here,
Now I'm so in love.
go up. So whatever track is selected, seems like it's kind of automating as expected here. But if you have another controller, make sure that, maybe hitting the keyboard, the computer keyboard, or another controller that might be jumping it to particular tracks, see if that could be causing it. But it seems to be kind of working as expected here. And we see just a further continuation. Says, even after taking right off. So I haven't run into that. But, make sure that, check the actual, selection here, like what channel is selected. So if it's writing automation and this channel is selected, or if one other thing that could cause issues like that is if the channels are linked, perhaps. So if we wanted to come to, let's say, the lead vocal here, like this channel could be linked in link groups with something, or if it's within a VCA, maybe that's causing it as well. So see if there's any links that are active within the project that might involve that in another channel. All right, so we have Alessandro Braz. Please, could you demonstrate how to use the continuous loop function in the sampler? Okay, so let's say I want to take, just do this. Let's get to our sampler control. Just drag this file in.
Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right after.
Okay, so let's just come over here. I'll make sure we don't have. Okay, so now we have the sampler track.
Right after that.
Okay, so. All right, so we'll just put it into like a continuous loop. So.
Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right after that, Garth Brooks.
And that's why I'm just holding down a key. So if you kind of look here, I'll just press this key.
Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right.
And if we say, okay, I want this to do it only once. So if I hold this down.
Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right after that, Garth Brooks.
After it does it one time, or we could alternate, so it'll play forward.
Right.
Just hit it here.
Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right after that, Garth.
And then if we wanted to just kind of come over here until release. So now it'll just.
Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right after.
And then as soon as I let go.
Right after that, Garth Brooks.
I let go, and then it'll just loop. So those are some of the different loop modes. So if you just wanted to, as soon as it's just playing back.
Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right after that, Garth Brooks. Right after.
Then as soon as I release. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, we have our question. How do you set up expression maps for sample libraries like Spitfire? Thank you. So really all you have to do is go to your Midi menu, and you'll see your expression map setup. So at this point, we could just say, okay, we want, we're going to add a map, we'll call it Spitfire or whatever, and then we could just simply add the different MIDI notes, so we could add different slots for the available articulations. And then once it's here, you could choose whether it's going to be an attribute or direction. So attributes are, basically for a particular file. So let me just come to a particular instrument, but it's really, but there's probably a good chance that these expression maps for any of the Spitfire libraries already exist. And then you could just simply, add the expression map here. But, as you would just, continue to add different slots, and we can think of these for our different articulations, what MIDI note. So let's say, okay, we want to start at C-2, and then that does, spiccato, or whatever the articulation is. You could just simply at this point come over and type in whether it's going to be, MIDI note messages, whether it's going to be CC data. You could just kind of come over and create the particular articulations and save them. But, before I would go through that process, I'm sure that you could probably find them freely available on the Cubase Nation Discord. All right, so we have Axel Pose saying hi to everyone, and Daniela Tokan, thanks for being on. Glad you could join us. DL White joining from Texas. All right, so we have a question from Jose Antonio Gazo. Is there a way to freeze tracks but keep adding plugins possible? I'd like to strip silence tracks and I'm scared to move them by accident while mixing. So if you did do like a silence tracks, one of the things that you could do if you don't want to accidentally move them is if we select, let's say I select all these events. If you come over to here, you can just say, I want to lock position. So now, once it's been done, you don't have to automatically, you can't accidentally move them once you strip silence. Getting to the part about, so if you want to freeze tracks but keep adding plugins. So I think with a frozen track, it's going to be frozen. If you wanted to continue to add plugins, I would choose just to do a render in place. Because what you could do with the render in place is we could come over. So we'll say, okay, we'll go to render settings. And I'll say, let's make this as separate events. We'll do our channel settings. And at this point, we can make it dry if we wanted to. We can mute the source events. And this will just render it as, here I have the channel selected. Let me do that one more time. So we'll just get edit. So once again, render in place. We'll go to the render settings, so separate events, and then we could just choose to render. So that will just go through each of the events and render it, and then that will create, not a frozen track, because a frozen track is frozen, but this is just an audio track, and you could add more plugins directly on top and do further processing if necessary. So, instead of freezing, just do a render in place. And then if you needed to, you could just at that point, choose to lock events as well. So. All right, so we just see from Jose Antonio Gazo, is there a way to timeline tracks in samples? I know the delay compensation either works in milliseconds. Is there a way to change that metric? So if you needed to move events, so let's say if we're here and I needed to move this particular event. So if I switch my timeline here, so let's say, okay, I duplicated this track, and let's say these are just off slightly. Okay, so I'm just going to come here and say, okay, our start time is a little earlier, but it's ever so subtle. So if you needed to, nudge the events, we could say, okay, I want to go down to samples. So now we could say, okay, as I nudge, I want to nudge by 1 sample or 10 samples. So if we wanted to zoom way in here, we could say, okay, I'm looking at this visually, so I could just use my nudging key commands, and you could access nudging functions right here. So you can say, okay, I just need to nudge this, and we'll choose by 10 samples. So as we do this ever so slightly, so we could just come over here, but depending on what your master time is set to, just like we spoke about a little bit earlier, switching between bars and beats and time code, you could just come over here to samples, and we can say, okay, now I want this to be 100 samples, and as I nudge, we could just use like the control and the left-right arrows, and then we could just nudge the events based on samples, or whether you want it to be a single sample, 10, 100, or 48,000 if you wanted to. So just switch that, and you could have, when you go to kind of the nudge, one of the cool things you can do is actually you can say, I want my my master time to be in bars and beats, but when we go to link to grid, I can say I want to nudge in samples. And then at this point, we could nudge based on samples while keeping our main time in actual bars and beats. So we could just say, okay, let's we're going to choose. So we can say, okay, now I want to nudge by 10 samples. So even though my master timeline is in the project, I can nudge in a different value. So just go to the nudge, and you want to make sure that link to grid is not turned on. And then we could now, if we link to primary time format, we can nudge in bars and beats. Otherwise, we could choose to nudge in a different time format. So that, let me know if that works for you. All right, so Mark Chiambo asked, hey Greg, is there a way to collapse all tracks in the mixer when collapse the folder in the project window without using mixer configurations? So I think it's going to be, the tracks are still there, even if it's kind of hidden in the particular, if the folder is closed. Okay, so let's say I have all my drum tracks here. So, if it's, all right, just collapse tracks in the mixer when I collapse the folder on the project window. So, the tracks are still there. One of the things that you could do if you wanted to hide those is if you come to the visibility settings, and let's say I just hide, so instead of collapsing the folder, where all my tracks are still there because it's still active in the project, if I hide, go to the visibility tab and just select the folder, then we could hide all the contents of the folder and not see it, and that will be synchronized, and we could synchronize that with any of the mix consoles as well. So instead of, because those tracks are still visible in the project, and if you want to hide them from the project and hide them once they're hidden from the project, that is reflected in the mixer, just click directly to the left in the visibility tab. So you don't have to set up a configuration for that, but I think that will get you where you want, Mark. See, Andy Gray says, hey Greg, loving the live stream as always. I learned so much, lots of stuff out there I didn't even know I wanted to. So that's great. And that's what I think is great about this format is people learn, things on questions they haven't thought to explore or ask about yet, and that can spark that little bit of creative juice to go out and work on your tracks. All right, so we have a question from Jose. Let's say I have an unbalanced stereo overhead track. Can I gain change the different left and right channels without having to convert the stereo track to two mono tracks? I mean, if you have that set up, so let's say I have my overheads on my drums here. I'll just turn these up so we could hear them. All right, so I'll just go ahead and I'll take these two tracks and I'll bounce them down, or we'll just freeze them. So I'm just going to come to, or render in place rather. So I'm going to go to my render settings. We'll just mix these down to one file. So let's say, but before I do this, I want to have an unbalanced between my left and right channels here. Okay, so let's go ahead and render in place. So let's go to And we'll mix it down, and we'll call this drums off balance. All right, I may have had these selected, sorry. Okay, so now we listen to our drums here. So, I mean, if you needed to balance this, I mean, you could just pan. And, you know, with the panning, adjust the level. So if we're directly in the center, we can hear more in the left channel than the right. But as I just pan more to the left, and that way we could balance out the two channels, the overhead channels that were kind of different levels. So now we look at it, and so where we were originally, if I go back to 0, there's more in the right channel than the left, so you just pan, and then you can just balance it out just like that. So if you don't want to convert it to 2 mono tracks and bring up the volumes, that's an easy way to do it. Just use the panner on the 2 tracks and add more of the track that you need to hear more of. So we see from DL White question, on the VariAudio reset question, can you re-import the tracks excluding VariAudio? So you could, if you import the audio files themselves, into a project, that's not going to include the VariAudio. If you export the selected tracks, that may include all the VariAudio. But if you just import the audio files into a fresh project, that would not include the VariAudio, and that would be kind of starting from scratch. All right, so we have Gail Amen. His question is, how do we make bass lines as side trance? I mean, electronics have lots of difficulties to make my own bass lines, and it takes me ages to compose them. I don't do like that type of work all the time, so I will probably do something stylistically horrible. But one thing that I would maybe use is, check out some of the different so let's say I'll just do maybe a new project here. All right. So let's say I'll just start with some drum loops. All right, so let's say if I want to do that, and I'll just find, so let's say we have a quick drum loop going on. All right, so if I was having a hard time with bass lines, just kind of coming up with ideas, I would probably start, playing around with, maybe some of the arpeggios. So let's add an instrument track. Let's get a retro log. All right, and let me just load up. Okay, so I'm just going to draw in one note that lasts for a measure here. So I'm just going to add an event. Okay, so we'll double click, and I'm just going to draw in let's say just one single note. All right, so you may listen to this go. All right, let's go. Okay, that's boring, but let's take a quick. Sorry, my mouse is acting weird. All right, so I'm going to just kind of play around with some of the MIDI plugins. Let's say, okay, let's go to like an Apache. So let's say, and I'll just make this, let's say, a chord. Okay, so now I have like a C major chord. So I just kind of played one chord, and then we could just come over and so, you know, being able to just kind of take, say, okay, now I want eighth note triplets instead. Drop it an octave. So let's say I wanted to just kind of maybe even start playing around with the filter a little bit. So say, okay, while it's playing. So let's come over to our MIDI insert, and let's just say, okay, I want to have this, we'll set up an auto LFO. So now what I want to do is I'm just going to right click here, and we're going to learn our MIDI message. I think we could just set it up here. So let's just say, and then if you want to, you know, change, you know, chords here, you could just, you know, double click on the particular event, and so now as we listen to it, and it's really just kind of from coming up with one chord. So let me know if, you know, so check out, you know, like different, you know, our Apaches. There's also kind of a step designer. So if you wanted to come over here, there's presets for doing bass stuff that you could just kind of have triggered as well. So if you wanted to come over here, so, you know, experiment with some of the MIDI plugins, and there's lots of great stuff, but, you know, like the arpeggiators are really easy to get into. So let me know if that's helpful or just totally ridiculous for what you wanted to accomplish. All right, so Johnny Chimside asks, greetings from Wales in the UK. I can open the Grand Instrument okay in Cubase, but I can't see a way of opening it as a standalone version. Is this possible? So yeah, it is possible, and it could be like when it was installed that you have a choice of installing it as standalone or a plugin. If you are running like an Apple M1 processor, you may have to you may have to choose for it to open in. It is Silicon native, but you should be able. Let's see if sometimes I don't install the standalones, but let me see if I do have it. Yeah, so I have the Grand 3 here. So make sure that it was actually installed, because I think you have like the actual option of, do you want to install a plugin? Do you want to install a standalone version? But this is running completely standalone. That's just using kind of my built-in audio. So yeah, you could definitely do that very easily. So let's see if we go to preferences and let's see if the ASIO. I'll just choose my. Yep, so it's definitely kind of working as standalone, but make sure when you installed it that you did actually install the standalone version and not only the plugin. But yeah, it's a wonderful instrument. All right, so we see question, why sometimes Align audio vocals just don't work properly, like vocal line. I've had it always work pretty well for me, but you could always manually do it quite easily as well. So let me just open up a quick project here. All right, so let me just make sure I don't kill everyone volume-wise. So say...
Somos iguales. Somos iguales.
All right, so if I wanted to take this and I'll say that's going to be like my source track, I'll add that and I'll select the tracks below that, add it as my alignment, and I'll just come over here. I just have both of these checked, and now we listen to it.
Somos iguales. Somos iguales.
Now, what else you could do is, if you need to tweak it perhaps a little bit, if you go to the warp and the warp tool at the top and go to free warp, at this point you could select, multiple parts or a single part and just say, okay, I need, this particular phrase. So you could put in kind of your warp markers and say, okay, this one needs to, and if I wanted to not just select one particular event and I'll go to my warp marker, I could say, I just need this to be a little early or a little late. So it's very easy to kind of manually do it if you need it. But I've always found that, the aligned audio works pretty well, and you could always kind of tweak it if necessary. If something is so far out, if it's kind of in the ballpark, like as you look at this, some of those are pretty far out, it didn't seem to have any problems. But if you need to manually do it, it's really easy since Cubase 12 just to do the warping directly on the project window. All right, so we see question, can I change the maximum number of sends per track? So again, you have 8 sends. You could send it to a group and then have 8 more sends, have 8 more sends. If you need to send it to different groups, instead of effects, you could use direct routing on each of the tracks. So if we come over here and let's say I have a number of group tracks. So we'll come over here to group. Say we'll add 4 group tracks. I could come to my racks and let's enable direct routing. Then I could just say, okay, on these tracks, I want to, and then we'll enable direct routing summing mode. So I can say, okay, if you need, to send it to different groups, for parallel processing. So I'm just going to activate my quick link and we'll send this all to group 1 for the selected channels. I can send it to group 2, to group 3, and group 4. And you could send this to, I think, even, so we could enable all of these. Let's add, let's say, an effects channel. And you could send it to, so while you can't vary the levels, you could come over here and use these. So you have, in Cubase Pro, you also have, direct outputs. So you could just send these to effects here. So in essence, you could have 8 sends and 8 direct outputs as well. So you could do 16, 8 you could have varying amounts, and 8 could be just sent directly to a source, but you could always send it to a group. Each one of those groups can add another 8 effect sends. And again, no issues with any delay compensations, all taken care of. All right, so we have Yal Aman is checking in from Istanbul. So, yeah, I'm watching all the news and keeping up on the news in Turkey. So we hope you and your family are all well, everyone you know. All right, and we have Kastab checking in, sending heartfelt greetings from India. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see, why doesn't Cubase support MP4 video envelope? So I'm not sure what a video envelope is, but you can import MP4 files into Cubase. So you may have to, make sure that you have the right container and codec. But let me know what you mean by MP4 video envelope, but you can import MP4 files into Cubase. So if you wanted to kind of, I'll open up. So if you go, I just searched, video support in Cubase. So this is a little chart that has all of the codecs and containers. So you see with MP4, you could do H.263, H.264 codecs. So make sure that you have the right codec, or if I'm not understanding what you mean by MP4 envelope. But you realize that in MP4 file, there could be 200 or 300 different types of MP4 files. It's not like a standard WAV file. So you're going to need the codec to match as well. All right, my chat field jumped on me. Let me just find where I was. All right, so we see, hello, Greg. I'm trying to create hi-hats, rolls, in Groove Agent. Is there a way to do that? Trying to do 16th, 30-second type notes, and this is from Mike Rivera. So the full version of Groove Agent will have kind of a note repeat function. So, and this isn't in Groove Agent SE that comes with Cubase, but the full Groove Agent, and I'm not probably set up on my controller to do it, but let's come over here. All right, so now if I wanted to play this particular, so let's say if we go to, and again, this isn't in the full version, but if you want to do this type of stuff, this is a great thing to do. So let's say if we go to the Performance tab, we could activate it. And then we could use different MIDI notes here to, trigger particular phrases. So let's say I want this to be triggered from F3, and I'll do G3, A3. All right, so now as I play notes, so if I want to do so this way you could just kind of trigger notes like that. So if you have the full version of Groove Agent, you could do these note repeat things very easily with that. Another thing that you could do is, let's say if I want to take, if I have it on just a particular note, you could go to MIDI Echo as a MIDI plugin. So if you don't have the full version of Groove Agent, so let's say I want to set my, and at this point we could just say, okay, I want this to be aligned to 30-second notes. So, but you could kind of set your different, so let's say, okay, I want this to be set to 30-second notes. Do straight 30 seconds. And then you could actually just trigger and automate this if you wanted to. So so that's another way of kind of doing it. But the note repeat function in Groove Agent, in the full version of Groove Agent, is just really perfect for that type of stuff. But let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see from Jose, question, is there a way to set the default position of the post fader FX insert line in the mixer? So I don't think, you could, if you start with a template, you could do that. But let's say if we have in our mixer, let's say I select a number of channels, I could just come over here and I think let's enable quick. I'm just going to turn on quick link, Let's see if that does it for. So you would have to, if you wanted it to be kind of a default, you might have to start with a template, because you may not have, different types. But yeah, so you would need to, it looks like it's done individually there. But if you start off as a template, then you can say, okay, I want these to be default, and just make sure it's for inserts. Yeah. So, and also if you save it as a track preset, I think that will be carried over, and you could load up multiple track presets as well. Okay, so all right, so you see from DigiBeats Music says, I can't make all the live streams and appreciate the indexing as I reach back mid-production to learn and apply on the fly. Is there a quick way to look up a group channel and see all the tracks routed to it? So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so let's say I'm here and all these tracks are going to be routed to group channel. Okay, so we'll call this drums. Okay, so now let's say we're in our group channel. We'll open up the edit channel settings. So we can see, okay, this is our drum group, and we see up right here are 11 sources. So we could actually pick and choose so we could see all the sources are routed to this particular group channel. So I can say, okay, I want to go to my sub kick, and we can say this is going to my drums group. So I want to now go to my drums. So we could just come over here anytime that we wanted to select, and we could also just come over here. So we can say, okay, the sub kick is going into my drums group. And then if we wanted to edit the drums group, I could click here. And then now we're editing the drums group, and we can see that the drums group is going to our stereo output. So again, just click here, and then we could see all the sources and channels that are feeding the active group. So let me know if that helps. All right, so you see from Amadeus, how to edit existing Groove Agent factory kit and save it as new without erasing the original factory patch. So, the original factory patches will be preserved. So let's say if I'm directly here, let's say I go to my Groove Agent and I have a kit, and now I wanted this to be tuned up and my snare to be tuned down, and let's say, panned all the way to the right, and this kick to be panned all the way to the left. I would just come over here and save the preset, and we'll call it Ace 2, and then the original kit is there, and now we could just come over and again see all of, so your original is intact, and then you could just come right over here and, load up different presets as well. So if you just want to come here, here's Ace 2. So the original is intact, and you just save it as a new preset. All right, Jose asks, is there a way to have more MIDI sends? So if you really needed more MIDI sends, you could just simply duplicate the track. So right-click on it, duplicate the track, and then that would be playing back, the same sources, and then you could have 4 MIDI sends on this one, 4 MIDI sends on this one that are independent of each other. So you can just come right over here and So if you needed more than 4 MIDI sends, you could do it like that. Thanks again for all the great questions from everyone. All right. All right, so we just see, hello, I have a question. Is there already a Cubase live stream about working on Dolby Atmos? So I think there's one that was done for Nuendo, and there is a Dolby Atmos video for Cubase that's on the Cubase channel. So yeah, definitely check those out. So it may not have been a live stream, but just a tutorial video. All right, wonderful to see David M. checking in from Liverpool. All right, so we have a question from Andy Gray. I'm slaving Pro Tools to Cubase via MIDI timecode. Working great, but can Cubase also send MMC so Pro Tools follows the playhead? I've tested this with Logic, which works. I just can't get Cubase to send MMC. So yeah, if we go to, MMC and MTC are really kind of the same thing. It's just like you initiate it from a different source. So, but if we go to transport, and let's get to the project synchronization setup. I think we could set it in here. Go under machine control, and then you could just have your MMC master active, and at this point can define the MIDI connections. So again, go to source under the project synchronization setup and go to machine control. So, but realize that when you do this, it's basically MTC, but you may hit play in Cubase, and then this is originally developed for tape machine so that you could hit play in the sequencer, and the tape machine, it would send a message to the tape machine, and the tape machine would start to play, and the time code from the tape machine would then feed the sequencer. So that, so in essence, it's the same thing. It's just you didn't have to necessarily hit start on the tape machine for it to initiate the sequence. So, but you could definitely do it. So make sure that you're doing it under machine control here. But, the playhead should move regardless if you're doing MTC or MMC. All right, so we see from Michael Teams, I may have asked this before, but bear with me. I added the Behringer X1 Touch to the CC121, but they seem to be doing the same thing. How to have them do different functions. All right, so there's a good chance that the Behringer is connected via like a Mackie control. So if we go to our studio setup, and go to, so you probably, if you click here, you may see like a Mackie control. And then when we go to the Mackie control, this may be sending the MIDI messages out directly to the Behringer. And that's fine. And that will work. And you'll have 8 faders, you'll have transport, and that could be very similar to what you're getting with the CC121 in kind of a single channel format. If you want it to define the Behringer to do other things, like utilizing functions of the MIDI remote, where I want this to do control room volume, I want this to do this, and tie it to this button instead of play is now undo, this is that. I would go to the studio menu and go to studio setup, and under the Mackie control, disconnect it from where your MIDI is connected to the Behringer. And then go to the MIDI remote. And there's a number of, I think, Behringer X1 Touch scripts that are already available. Click on the plus sign. You want to say, okay, it's a Behringer X1. And you could select like the MIDI input and output port. So say, okay, I want to have it go, and you so just kind of define that. And then if you wanted to kind of set, what you do at this point is you go, okay, I have 8 sliders. So I want to come over here and adjust the slider, and you could build just by moving the faders on the unit. You say, okay, now I have an encoder. So I want to put my encoder here and move knobs. And we could just come over and add these particular functions. Then as we say, okay, so kind of physically map out what this is going to look like for your controller. So we can say, okay, this is, you could have, rotary encoders, knobs, buttons, trigger pads. So, create just a visual layout. So say, okay, I have big faders, I have a button, I have this. Then hit the particular function, hit the button, and that will populate the controls. And then once you have kind of all of the controls set up, we could go to our mapping assistant, and then we could say, this control, and we'll come over and say, okay, here's our Behringer. This control, I want to do, this function here. So I want this, so you could right click and say, this fader is going to control send 1. So I'm going to go to my sends. Let's say we pick up for MIDI remote. So now when I move this fader, that fader is going to control the send level. So we could define all these different functions in the mix console, control room, transport for different functions. So this way you could customize whatever, figure out exactly. It's like, I want a knob that does this, and then you could assign, from your created device, you could then just assign the particular functions to knobs, faders, buttons, encoders, whatever you have on your particular controller. So, but check the, if you go to the Steinberg.net forums, you could actually, there's a number, and just look for like Cubase MIDI remote scripts. There's a lot that last time I saw, there's a number of them for the Behringer already set up. All right, so we see from David M. Hi, Greg. I've been trying out sidechaining Retrolog to play an audio track through the filters, etc. Is there a way to sidechain several tracks or even the full stereo mix through the instrument? All right, so let's say I wanted to do, just revert this. All right, so I'm going to just take, like, these tracks. We could route it to a group if we wanted to, but I don't think we have to do that. So let's add we'll add an instance of Retrolog, and we'll come over here. And let's say, okay, I want the bass to sidechain in. Okay, so we're going to come over here and let's activate the sidechain, and let's say, okay, we're going to send the bass. But once you do this, you could add multiple sidechain sources as well. So you're not limited to just one particular instrument. You could sidechain multiple tracks. So we're going to activate the sidechain, and we'll just bring up kind of the input. So let's say as we play, I sometimes forget how to, let me just, All right, so I'm going to take... So I think, so at that point you could... And then you could just set up kind of multiple sources for the sidechain. And if you needed to, you may not be able to do sidechain from the master bus, but if you sent everything to a group, you could use the group as the sidechain input. So try that, David. Thanks for being on the live stream. All right, so we see from Axel Pose, did Greg say there's a Discord? So yeah, you can check out the Cubase Nation Discord. All right, and we see from Jose Antonio Gazzo, says, Greg, thanks for going through all my questions. So that's why we do these live streams, so people could ask questions. I see Jazz Dude was kind enough to send the link for the Discord. All right, reading through comments. All right, Michael Team says, smash the like button and keep me gainfully employed. That's a good thing, so we'll keep the Hangouts going, the live streams. All right, so we see Bruce just asking if other people from California are in-house. So I think there are. I saw Gerald Ely on. All right, so you see a question from DL White. Hi, Greg. In the sample library, samples aren't playing when I click on them. The sample playing... samples playing, but no sound. All other sound is working. Is there a sound output setting for previewing samples? So, if we think about this, so we go to our media bay here and we want to, audition different loops. Really all you have to do, what you want to make sure is, as you're working on this, that, because if we think about this hasn't been added to a track yet. So go to your audio connections and go to control room, and you want to, if you don't have so it's going to get routed through the listen bus. So if we go to our outputs here, probably set this to not connected, and in the control room, right click and you can add a monitor. Like I have my HS7s here. So I have these set up so that when I hit, my mix left and right, so now I could audition all of my samples because it's going through the mix bus because it hasn't been assigned to a track with different effects. So the trick often is to go to your audio connections and go to the control room, add your monitor there, leave your stereo out defined but not connected. Otherwise, the signal can get sent out twice. It seems counterintuitive at first, but once you do it, then it'll make sense. And so a lot of different aspects will be kind of sent through the control rooms in Cubase. All right, so we see a question. For parallel compression, if I have any inserts on the main track and send will go post-insert, how to get a pre-send signal, the inserted effects on the main track? Okay, so if you're, sending this to, like if you're sending this track to a group, okay, so we'll call this our drum group. Okay, so I take this, let's go to our sends, and I think all you'd really have to do is if you send this to your drum group, we activate it, right click, and you can move to pre-fader or move to post-fader. So when we see kind of the bluish color, aqua, that's going to be pre-fader, and post-fader will be orange. So I think if you just, for your situation, try just right-clicking, and I think just sending it pre-fader. So give that a shot. Michael Team says a revelation of the day is the ARP setup. All right. So I just see question. Can I remix a Avicii song like they did in Tomorrowland in Cubase 12? So how, for example, my Avicii tribute project with standard beats from YouTube. So I'm not familiar with if it's Avicii song or Tomorrow. So I'm not familiar with what they did in Tomorrowland. So you could definitely take, any audio element, any MIDI track, virtual instruments, mix it, edit it together. So obviously Cubase is used for doing remixes constantly. So, but if there's like a particular thing, sorry for my ignorance and that I don't know, I'm not familiar with the Tomorrowland. So. Okay, wonderful to see Kristen Parisi and David Reuter from Big Tent Productions in Nashville. So wonderful songwriting group in production. Glad you guys can make it. All right, so we see a question from Junior Rivero. Does the mix console have presets for the faders? Did it ever? So, there's not much sense probably to have a mix, a preset for a fader because you just move it up and down. So, but if you want it to have I have a channel here. So say I have my channel settings, and if I want it to have like all of my processing where we have different where we have EQs and different insert effects and channel strip. There's presets for those. So, if we come over to, we'll see a presets folder. Let's go to track presets. We'll say audio. And let's say, okay, I'm looking for a vocal. So, while you're playing, you could just say, okay, I want this to be, and we'll just choose a category instead of subcategory here. So I want vocal preset. So now I could drag these directly onto the track, and that will automatically populate, all of our, we can see that as we do this, all these presets will automatically load up the plugins. But, the fader itself doesn't probably need to have an actual preset, to recall. You could save it as a track preset by right-clicking on the track and save a track preset, but like having a preset for minus 12 dB or minus 6 dB is probably not the most useful thing for a lot of people. But if it's keeping like all the channel settings, there's lots of presets for different instruments that are included with track presets. All right. Sorry, my chat field just jumped. Let me just catch up. All right, so I think I'm... David M. says he loves that warp thing, and he warps even when he doesn't need to warp. That's the power you have in Cubase. All right, so we see Gareth on, so glad you can make it today. And he says match audio is a top feature. And Gareth just asking, is just hoping that I'm doing well, so I'm doing great. And now it's even better that I see you're on the live stream. All right, we see Mark Winslow from Hawaii giving everyone a aloha. All right, so we have a question. A tuning plugin like Auto-Tune, which is better, to insert it as an insert or an effects and send it? I would probably do, an insert, because if you're, the only time you would probably, maybe do an effects, like do an effects end is when you want to share the content. So I want the same reverb to be distributed to multiple instruments where we could have varying amounts. So realize that if you're sending like multiple sources to a tuning plugin that, if you have two different tracks and they're both out of tune, it's going to do the same. It's going to try to correct for both tracks on the same time. So it may correct one note, and then as it's correcting for one note that's out of tune, it's detuning the other note. So I would always do that as an insert. And, if you... and one other thing, if you're not that familiar with it, is check out like the pitch correct plugin. So there's lots of great stuff, and it's included directly with Cubase. So if you wanted to kind of just turn something on and say, I'm in the key of D major, you could have kind of a quick automatic pitch correction there with pitch correct plugin. See, Gareth is very happy to see Michael Teams on the live stream. All right, wonderful to see Best Korean Jesus on the live stream from San Diego. Or Californian for Bruce. All right, still reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions and great discussion. All right, so we see from Michael Hibbert. Hi, do you guys do Cubase for iOS? So yeah, Cubase is kind of our mobile DAW. You could take projects from Cubase and import them, so you could do kind of a complete production on Cubase and import it into Cubase if needed, but it's available for iOS, Android, and Chromebook. So yeah, same company does that. So you could start off a track on your phone, do some more work on your iPad, do some more work on your studio computer. Okay, reading through comments. All right. So we see, hi Greg, do you know how I can move the cursor with nudge function like Pro Tools? Is it possible, for example, move cursor one SG, maybe 1 second on right side? So if you, so let's say I have my timeline now set to, so let's say if I'm here, I'm on the bar. So I think if I hold down Control, so right now this is set to bar. So if you hold down Control or Command, and on the numeric keypad, you could just hit minus to go backwards and move the cursor, and go Control plus to go forward, and that's based on the grid settings. So if you wanted to go 1 second, we could switch this to seconds and say, okay, now I'm going forward 1 second and back 1 second. I'm going 100 milliseconds. So plus to go forward, based on the nudge factor, and you could just go backward as well. So depending on what kind of your master time resolution is, so you can say, okay, I just want to navigate, move by beat. So control or command plus on the numeric keypad, minus to go backwards, plus to go forward. All right, so we have a question from Mischeck from Zambia. Can you convert an audio wave into MIDI notes in Cubase? So we could do it for, it's designed for monophonic audio. So if I wanted to take like this bass part, we could go into our VariAudio editor. So let's say we're here, let's activate VariAudio. It's going to do an analysis and do kind of our pitch correction. Let me just zoom in here. Okay. And now, so if we have like a vocal, saxophone, bass part, etc., something that's not playing chords, we could just select this, and then from the VariAudio editor, so let's say we'll see right here, extract MIDI, and then we could include or exclude different pitch bends, and now we could just have it converted to MIDI just like that. So once you're in the VariAudio editor, so you double click, that'll take you in. So make sure you're in the VariAudio tab, that it's activated, and then choose function, extract MIDI. All right, so we have Camille checking in from the Czech Republic. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we had another question from Esteban. When I create an automation track and assign a color to the track, the automation uses that color. When I change the track color, the automation doesn't change. How can we change the automation color? Okay, so let's say we have red here for our track. Let's open up automation. All right, so just draw in some perfect automation. Give me a Grammy. All right, so let's say we change the track color. So let's make it yellow. And now when I come over, we can see that that is yellow. So if I want it, let's see if they're tied together. So yeah, the automation track will be tied with that. So it looks like, so make sure that when you're doing it, that you don't have the event change. So let's say if I change it to red again and the event is selected, it looks like, let me just not have. All right, so let's say if I change this color, so I'll just grab my color palette here. So if you select the track, notice that when we do that, all right, so let me make sure that I have no events are selected and the track is selected. So we come here to green, then the automation is automatically covered. So if you change it, so if the track is changed, that will automatically change the particular automation track. But if you have an event selected and you change the color of the event, that may not do it. But it looks like, the automation tracks follows the color of its parent track. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Do I need to have any sound card for using Cubase 12? I'm using ASIO for all with low latency. So that'll work. If you're doing just strictly MIDI stuff or you're doing notation, you don't necessarily, some people will do work where they don't need to hear audio coming out. Having a sound card will give you better performance. And, obviously it's easier to record audio, if you're just kind of working with samples, or if you're not recording, it may not be as super critical. When you actually go to record, you'd probably want to be using something besides your built-in sound card. So, think of it that way. But, if you're like kind of in a mobile situation where it's like, oh, I need to work, I'm on a plane for 5 hours, I want to do some editing, you could definitely do that with the built-in sound card. So, but it's not the best quality. It's not going to give you the best latency if you're recording with virtual instruments. But you don't necessarily have to have a audio interface, but it's highly recommended. So even if there's a lot of great options, even if you've got like a Steinberg UR22 or UR12, which is like $100 depending where you live. So. All right, so Best Green Jesus has been lurking. He was like number 25. Thanks. We're always glad to have you on the live stream. Hope you're well. Gareth is calling him Sir Lurk a lot. All right. Can anyone except Greg say anything about Halion 7 and Absolute 6? Are we there yet? Maybe ask me 1 week from today. You could ask me that same question. So, all right, we'll move on. So come back on next Friday's live stream and ask again. So. All right, so we see a question. Will Cubase have a dual mono insert option in the future? Is it possible to edit and reorder buses from the audio connections? So you could kind of, if you have a stereo track, one thing that people don't realize a lot, and it really could depend on the plugin itself. So a lot of plugins, will have the ability to kind of flip back and forth between mono and, and stereo, where you have different settings for each channel. So for instance, if you go to frequency EQ, so a lot of plugins, will do this within the plugin itself. So you could say, okay, I want left, right. So I could have, different settings for left and right channel. If you are on so let's say if we go to our edit channel settings and now we go to routing, you could also just pick and choose and say, okay, I want it, if my plugin didn't support it, that we could go to our inserts, and when we go to routing, that we could switch this to mono and switch to mono here and have these be sent to different sources. So we can say, okay, this is going to process the right. This is going to process the left channel. So you could do stuff like that as well. So I think that, I know the development team is, cognizant of, wanting to have more flexibility with switching from stereo to mono and vice versa within the track as well. So. All right, so we see, good day, Greg. I'd like to add a VST effect on a vocal based on the loudness and volume of the vocal. Did you have any idea how to? Thanks a lot. So I'm just thinking about this. Add a VST effect on a vocal based on the loudness, volume of the vocal. So, there's some what you could do, so if you wanted like a particular effect to kick in at a certain threshold, so let's say I wanted to take this guitar part and let's send it to, or let's say maybe we'll do like maybe a snare. All right, and I want to add an effects channel. So let's say we want to send it to a reverb. Now, if we go to this particular track, and this could be a vocal, could be any source. So we go to the effects return channel. We could say afterwards that we go to dynamics and we could compress this signal. So as soon as, and I think we may just throw the compressor before that, and after it gets to a certain threshold, then you could kick in the effect if you wanted to. So let me know if that's kind of what you wanted to do. So you could kind of block the particular effect from coming in until a particular threshold is reached. And we could also just sidechain into this particular compressor. So we can say, okay, as soon as the vocal, or as soon as this kick track gets to a certain threshold, then kick in the reverb that's on that particular track. So let me know if that's kind of what you're looking to do, Harry. But I think you could do it with sidechaining and placing the compressor and sidechaining that compressor to another source, even if it's the same source. All right, so Max Arrington asks, quick question, how can I automate add track to have a minus 18 dB gain when adding an instrument or channel? So there isn't like an automatic set it to minus 18. I kind of pass this along as a feature request personally myself and from feedback from the group. But let's say if you have like an audio track, you could come over here. So let's say, okay, we have our audio track, and let's say we set the fader to, minus 18. So at this point, we could save this as a track preset. And there isn't like a default track preset. And this is one of the things I'm trying to get added. So now when we come over here, you could just say, okay, I want to go to my media bay. Let's go to user presets, and we'll say track presets, and you can say audio, and you could just say, okay, here's my default preset, and then you could just kind of add in the track with, so you could just load in the track and have minus 18, or just double click and add tracks like so. So that way that could be added in at minus 18 dB. So if you have your media bay open, you could just kind of jump immediately there and just double click and add tracks that way. But hopefully, I'm still lobbying to try to get, a default setting for adding audio tracks or instrument tracks. All right, so we have a question. Can you change the track colors from the mix console instead of the project view? So let's go to our mix console. So if you just go to the bottom, you could just change the colors. You see just to the right of the name, and you could change the colors right there. So you can see the kind of the color wheel pop up. So, and you can see that it'll reflect throughout the channels as well if you have that preference activated. All right, so Benny from Sweden wants everyone to hit the like button. All right, so I see Gareth says, woohoo, revelation of the day, but I don't know what it was because it was a while ago. All right, so we see Daniela Tocan on, and she's apologizing for being late from Germany. So the only the only downside of being late is you have to hit the like button immediately. So, all right. So you see from Nate Dixon just asking, does this apply to Cubase as well? So I'm not sure what the function was. Maybe if you could re-ask, I might be able to clarify for that. All right. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, trying to find my spot. Okay, so I think I'm close. All right, so just see from Junior Rivero, it says, I need presets for my outputs on the mix console. So again, I'm not sure if it's, if you need like processing presets, but again, you can, just come right over here if you wanted to load track presets. So if you're here, say, okay, I wanted to do, whatever function that you want, again, there's going to be track presets that are available. So I'm not sure, or if you needed presets to say, take all these tracks to this particular output. So, if you have the routing up, we could select any number of tracks and, just do routing. So I want to send all these to my drums group, hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. And then you could kind of reroute all the particular, all the selected channels to different outputs. So I'm not sure if you need presets for that or you just kind of set it as needed. All right, so we have Uno Memento checking in from Finland. Glad you could make it today. We say that Gareth is drinking tonight and he's already dizzy, so that's good to know. All right, so we see when working with TuneTrack MIDI grooves and dropping them to the timeline to build a drum beat, the names of the grooves are extremely long, which makes editing them messy and unpleasant. All right, so let's say if I don't have TuneTrack software, but let's say if I come here, let me just load up a quick kit. All right, so say I drag this to the pattern to my project window here. All right, so if you just come over here, so you probably see the name listed, just go to the name field, and then you could just kind of shorten the name. So, you could probably do that. There's also a preference where you could say, I think maybe event display, show event names. So let's say, this was the event name of this particular was really long. All right. And then, it's annoying when you go to edit. And so when we select it, so maybe if you, again, go to preferences, you could say event display, show event names. and then you could turn that on or off. So now when you hit apply, hit OK, then you won't actually see event names on the tracks when selected. But it's, if you have a long name, it's what TuneTrack probably gave the name of the MIDI file. So that's why you probably see it where, so it's not much. We can turn it off or you could edit it, but it's out of, as you're importing the file, it's going to carry the name over that was coming from the instrument. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions today. Hope everyone's learned a new tip or trick. All right, so we see Pablo is up on stage and not feeling well, so we wish him well. Hope he gets to his gig. So we see a question. Hello, Greg. Is Beat Designer going to get an update? I can't generally comment on things in the future, but I'll pass it along as, there's always new functions and features that people want. But we'll have to see what comes in upcoming versions. But if there's anything in particular you'd want to see, feel free to let us know. And you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, reading through comments. All right, reading through comments still. All right. All right, so we see from DL White, says, thanks, Greg and John, for the answer. It worked. All right. All right, so we just see from Daniela, so you promote Melodyne, but they wish iLock, and this here is more than a no-go. Can I register without iLock and change PC? For sure, there are companies that think iLocks help, but will not friend with me. So, we did kind of a cross promotion. We don't really promote Melodyne, but Melodyne was kind enough to give, Melodyne Essentials, during a promotion just as a marketing thing. But, we don't necessarily promote Melodyne. And if they use iLock, that's their decision. It's really kind of outside, so while, we did stuff with, we also offered stuff with Arturia and other companies during our last promotion, and it was very generous of those companies to, and I'm sure that they were able to attract a lot of new customers, but, we don't necessarily promote them. But if you have issues with iLock, you could, get in touch with Ceremony and let them know your feelings. There's a reason that Steinberg doesn't use iLock. So. Okay, so we have a question from Jeweler to Rocket. How many ways to fine tune in Cubase and and to completely change the sound. Would like to see ways you approach it on Cubase. Thanks. Okay, so let's say I want to, all right, so I'll revert. All right, so let's say if I want to take a track here, so I'll just put it in the listen bus so we can hear it. So if I wanted to do just tuning, we could transpose just by selecting the event. And if you want to do fine tuning, so when you transpose, this will be by semitone, and we have fine tune, which will be by cent. So you have 100 cents per semitone. So if I go down 8, apparently the harmonic aspects in the universe will all be aligned. So you could adjust fine tuning like that. So that's probably the easiest way to do fine tuning. And if we could go into, other processes, and, that would be how I would approach it. Let's say if we do the pitch shift in, let's see if we could do fine tuning in the pitch shift. So let me just reset here. Adjust my semitone. So if you wanted to also just kind of take the file and graphically tune, we could do this, within the pitch correction. So if we see it kind of a transpose, and this is more of an offline process where you could transpose or set fine tuning here. And if you wanted to do it graphically, you could just graphically tune here, but there's no, so between here and here is, one semitone. So, but it's not going to be like, okay, I want to set the range, this whole range is one semitone. So, and you could adjust kind of like the fine tune point here. So if I just select, I could say, okay, that's 37 cents, 33 cents. We could adjust and do it offline as well. So depending how you want to approach it. All right, so we have all right, so we have a question from John Barry. He says, hi, Greg. Sometimes when I record a part, it also activates record on the chord track and changes the chords in the chord track, and record is off on the record track. Any ideas? All right, so let me just go to a different project here. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone today. All right, I'll just revert this. All right, so let's say I have my Rhodes here, and I have a chord track, but I don't have the record track record enabled. All right, so let's say if I want to record, let's say chords here. All right, so that's not, that didn't record. So let's say if I have the chord track record enabled. So then the chord track is set. Now let's say if I have this chord track set to Rhodes and I don't have this turned on. Let's see if it records. All right, so now if I record enable the chord track while it's still recording then, but if the chord track is not record enabled, it doesn't seem to be. So maybe it's just accidentally armed for record and maybe you don't realize it. So check to see, and let's see if it makes any difference if it is set to use monitor tracks. So the only time it seems to record is when the record enable for me is activated on the chord track, and then it captures the chords and records it. But let me know if I'm doing it differently than you. All right, so we see from Daniela Took Hands, it's probably about discussion of Melodyne and VariAudio. So yes, but does VariAudio work to separate complete orchestra? I do not need it for audio. So, VariAudio is really designed for like tuning correction. But again, we don't really promote, Salmoni systems. Are a different company, just like, if you complained to Salmoni about Steinberg licensing, it's not much they could do about it. So. All right, so we have Spike Williams, who's settling into his new community in the Rhondda Valley in Wales. Thanks for joining us. Glad you can make it today. All right, so I see from Daniela, says, I have, for example, Indie from Sonokinetic and bought the conductor scores for education. So I'm not sure what the Indie from Sonokinetic is, so I'm not sure if that's a WAV file, if that is a MIDI file. So if you could maybe specify, Daniela, that would be great. All right, so you're seeing from Daniela, so I need a way to put MIDI phrases. I do not like such cross promotions. Okay. So, if you don't like the cross promotion, no one's making you go out and get no one's forcing you to go out and get a cross promotion. It's just, it seems like most people really liked it because they could have, something, they could get software without having to invest in it, and the companies can use that to upgrade like those tools to other, to new customers. So, but if you want to get, MIDI data in, so I have a keyboard controller, like a MIDI keyboard, like a piano keyboard. And if we wanted to actually, just record directly into the system, all I had to do is hit record. So if I was reading the score, I could just record that data in, and we could look at it graphically. We could look at it in standard notation. Let's say if I wanted to clean this up really quickly, if we wanted to have it quantized, we could just, have all of the different settings. So, if you wanted to input the MIDI, having a MIDI keyboard, if you have the score and you want to, look at the music and play it in, you could do that very easily in Cubase. But if you could let me know what the indie from Sonokinetic is, if that's Midi or an audio file or CD, whatever it is, that would be helpful information. Okay. All right, so we see question from Paul00. Any news on Halligan Sonic compatibility with Apple Silicon Native? So it's coming soon. So maybe ask me the same question next Friday. I might have a more definitive answer. All right. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. Do I have to download everything in the Cubase library? No. So when you go to your library manager, you don't have to download everything, but you do own it. So if you go to the Steinberg download assistant here, just open it. So there's a lot of great stuff. So different instruments, different content sets of loops. You're not required to download it, but if you paid for it, I would download it, install it, and use it. So I'll just show you here. So everything, when you select like Cubase Pro 12, everything in here you paid for. So I know as an end user, if I paid for it, I would want to download it and use it. But we don't force you to. So like if you don't want any content, if you never do drum loops, you never do instruments, you don't want, drums, but if you want everything that you paid for, so it's like if you paid for a car and, they're going to give you all 4 tires, so generally. All right, so we see from John Barry, if you use Control/Alt-R to select a right pane, it makes the pane active. You can then use Control-Alt-Left and right arrows to select menus on the right pane. In the mixer window, Control-Alt-R selects the right pane, but it's not active, and you cannot move through the menus. Could you confirm this, or is it just me? Okay, so let's say if we're here, just get my so say I'm here. I just want to. Okay, so I'm gonna go to my mix console here. All right, so on the right zone, so when I hit like Alt Control or Command Option, you can see that it takes me through there's 4 different. So right now it's on loudness, and if I go hit the left arrow, it goes back to meter. It then goes back to main to control room. So this will allow you to go back and forth between the 4 different options. And you can see kind of the names here. So you can say, okay, let's go to. So that seems to work for me, but make sure that, you tab to the different zones here. So once you see the highlighted area, then you can just toggle back and forth between the different zones. Like I could switch between visibility, history, and snapshots right there. And sometimes some of the zones will have a lower zone. So visibility, we could see that we have lower zones in the bottom between channel zones, then history, then snapshots. And then, so it seems like it kind of works as expected for me in the right zone of the mixer. But realize that there are 4 different zones. So you have zones that are set from the top and from the bottom. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see John Costigan with his reamping, says he was so thrilled by the reamped recording he didn't even compare it to the original. So I think that says enough right there. So, but he'll check the phase level and report back. So I'm just curious, but I think it should be pretty minimal, if anything. But if you didn't feel it was out of phase, that's probably a good sign. So. All right, great to see Randy Lee in the live stream. Okay, so we see a question. Does Cubase materials make enough to compose any kind of EDM? So you definitely have enough, like, built-in loops. And with the instruments that you have between Pad Shop, Retrolog, Hallian Sonic, Groove Agent SE, anyone that has been doing this for, a long time, we would all kill to have had that functionality for that price. So you could, the possibilities are pretty endless. All right. All right, so we see question. Any idea why Cubase 11 Pro would kick out of record randomly? Sorry about that. My tablet fell here. My Microsoft Surface. Right, read all the comments from. Okay, so something that can cause it to go out of record, sometimes people don't realize, is, maybe if it's at, so I'm not sure if it's, you say random, but let's say I'm here and I have punch out active, like maybe I hit the letter O on my computer keyboard, and let's say I was recording, and then it's like, oh, it just kind of popped out of record. Why did it do that? So let's say I come here and I record, so sometimes it could be that there's a punch out that's turned on. So sometimes if you're naming, maybe you hit the O key accidentally and you turned on punch out. So that's usually kind of what I find when people are just randomly stopping record. So check to make sure that your punch out isn't turned on in that case. Okay. So you see John Barry just indicating that he had chords already on the track. So let me see if I could reproduce that with the chords already present on the track. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and record. So if no chord was selected, let's say if this is selected, I'll hit record again. All right, and let's say I'm gonna set this to the monitor tracks. So it doesn't seem to be turned on. Let me just, so you have chords on your track. I might have the instrument track set to follow a chord track, or have the transformer on 2. So it doesn't, it seems like the only time it's recording for me is when, is when it's actually record enabled here. So, and sometimes there's preferences where you could select and record enable is automatically turned on, but it doesn't look like that is doing it for the chord track either. But let me know if I did something differently than you did, John. So Gareth is says we should all spare a thought for Burt Bacharach. So yeah, definitely an amazing composer. I had a friend that worked with him for maybe a dozen years or so on many projects. So maybe I'll see if I can get him for our next live stream or next Zoom meetup. All right. Hi, Greg. Do you know when and if Steinberg will release Cubase 13? So there's no release date that's been announced. I'm sure that they will. I'm almost positive they will release a Cubase 13. We don't necessarily want to announce stuff. One, I think it's annoying to customers, they're talking about it and I can't have it. So generally Steinberg will just kind of, when it's ready, and then it'll be released when it's all ready to go. So, but yeah, it is being worked on. And there's parts of Cubase 14 that are being worked on, and parts of Cubase 15 that are being worked on. So, all right, so I see John's just mentioning it with the chord track. He's using a separate monitor. So let's say if I wanted to have a separate monitor track, again, select this track, hit record. So still doesn't seem to populate the chords in the chord track for me. All right, just reading through a bunch of great comments on Burt Bacharach. All right, so you see John Barry just says, thanks, Greg, for trying, but I'm using 2 monitors and have the mixer as an extra window. I guess that's where the issue is. So, yeah, even if the, it's just the area focus. So you probably, there's key commands to bring to front, or if you, just select, click in on the mix console to make that the active windows as well. So, but you could definitely do it. All right, so you see from Craig says punches and recording kicking out. Punch not activated, recording with VSTs. Here glitch, then kicks out of record. Plenty of RAM. So from reading that, I assume it's maybe a MIDI track or an instrument track that's routed to a VST instrument, or if it's an audio track. So and also. If you notice it with all, if it's an instrument track, if you notice it with all VST instruments or just particular VST instruments, that would be interesting to know. Gareth keeps me getting a bit Supertramp. My keyboard skills aren't good enough, so. But love Breakfast in America. It's such a wonderful record. Okay, so we see from John Barry, it says, yes, activate it to follow the chord track. So let's come over here. So even with it set to follow the chord track, it doesn't do it. Let me see if live input is on. So I don't seem to be able to recreate that, but let me know if I did something again differently than you did. Stevie Wonder for the next Zoom. I could get his assist, like the guy who's kind of set up his computers and worked with him for 38 years or so. I could get my friend Rob to join us for a Zoom meetup. So he could tell you all sorts of great stuff. Super smart guy. All right. So we see a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to prevent the fader from moving while scrolling with the mouse in the mix console? So, it's as if you accidentally scroll this, it's going to move the fader. But if it accidentally does it, all you have to do is just click right here, and that will take you right back. So there is a separate undo history for the mix console. So let's say you're just kind of like, I'm just over here, I'm adjusting this, and and my mix will never forever not be the same. Just click here and undo. So if you did 100 bad edits in a row, you EQ'd, you added a plugin. So let's say we come over here. I adjusted parameters within the plugin. I could just undo. Right back to where you were. So if you accidentally did it, so it's, because there's a lot of people that really like mixing and doing fine mixing and writing the vocal fader with their scroll wheel of their mouse. I know like too many professional mixers, this is how they work, using the scroll wheel. And so you could just, if you did it on accident, just hit Alt or Option plus Z, or just hit the undo button right here in the mix console, and it's a separate undo history from the edits undo history. All right, so we see Kenny Jobson saying hello to everyone. All right, so we see how many VST instruments can I put simultaneously in a project? So I think there might be a fixed limit of 256, but each of those 256 instruments, like you could load up 256 Hallions. I think theoretically, I think that's what the limit is. I haven't tried in a long time. And each instance could have 64 MIDI channels, so should be enough, I think. Okay. Okay, so you see Craig just mentioning, I think this is with the popping out of records is mostly recording instrument tracks, not 100% sure though. So yeah, you see if you could, if it's like one particular instrument, if that's causing it. So. All right, so you see from Daniela, Greg, can you demonstrate VariAudio? Sonokinetic have phrases, wave files you trigger with Midi. I need to track from contact the Midi and have the orchestra phrase played. So if it's going to be like, individual parts, most orchestral instruments are going to only play a single note at a time. Let me just jump over to this project here. Hang on just real quick. All right, so got a text from my wife. She had to go to a meeting, so make sure my son get back from the bus stop okay, so everything's good there. All right, so I'm just going to revert. All right, so let's say if I have a bass part here. So at this point, I could, we'll go to VariAudio. I'll open it up. And then it could do its analysis. So I can say, okay, I want to take this note and move it. And so, we're able to do, so if you have the audio file and it's monophonic instruments, like here I have some piano bleeding through. And then if I wanted to convert that, we could do our tuning on it, but if we wanted to then convert that to MIDI, at this point we go to the functions and extract MIDI. And now we could have all of our MIDI data laid out for us. So you could try that, if your keyboard skills are good, and you could play parts in with the piano. That's, you might be faster doing it that way. If you wanted to, if you wanted to actually, you could write the notes in music notation if you wanted to, or just sequence parts or try extracting it. So if it's an individual voice, as opposed to like piano chords, You could use VariAudio for that. And depending on how well each part is recorded, can make a big difference on the accuracy of the kind of transcription of it, the conversion. So Johan just saying that undo hint was very welcome. I guess with the mix console, yeah, a lot of people don't know that. All right, reading through comments here. All right, so you see from John Barry, it says that my navigation with shortcuts is fine on the arrange page, only on a separate mixer window on a separate screen. I can't open or close left or right pane, but they're not active for further navigation. So I think if you hit, let's say F3 for the mix console, that becomes the active window. So now, so let's say if I'm here, let's say I have my mix console here, and I'll take like this project window and resize it. So imagine we can imagine this as 2 screens maybe. So, if you click here, this is the active window. If you click here, this is the active window. But I think if you just hit F3, that now it's the active window. And then there is a key command for bring to front. If you wanted to switch the focus back to the main project window. So again, if you hit like F3, then that becomes the main window. So that my functions and navigating my different is fine here. If I hit F3, again, that will keep the window open, but switch the, particular functions as we navigate. So, and if we set up the key command here, let's see if it's even listed. But I think if we go to key commands, there's like a bring to front. Yeah, under the project window. So if you set a key command for bring to front, then that will bring the main project window into focus, and hitting F3 will bring the mix console window into focus so that you could navigate and quickly go back and forth between them. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right. All right, so we have a question from Craig Nobles. When I do an audio mix down and an audio track, I highlighted that track doesn't make it into the mix down. Record mode is set to tape machine. Thanks again. Okay, so probably what it is like if you have a track selected and this track is record enabled. So let's say we just set this to our stereo in. Just switch to different tracks. So it's not if the track is selected, but if record enable on that particular track is selected. So let's say we jump over to this project. So if record enable is turned on this, so make sure that you actually just come here and and I have it set on my system, and you may see me kind of get trapped in this as well when I do like a render in place and I have the track selected and it's record enabled. But just bypass the record enabled. It could still be selected, but if it's record enabled, then it's like waiting to see an audio input. So I would just simply make sure that the track is not record or monitor enabled, and then do the export. It can be selected but not record enabled. That will mute it from the export. All right, we're doing pretty well on time. All right. All right. So I just see from Daniela says, thanks, Greg, but why did I buy Melodyne? This, with cross promotions, I do not like, I don't think we made you buy Melodyne. So, you could have gotten a free version to try out with the Cubase promotion, but it doesn't necessarily force you to buy Melodyne. So, sorry if you bought something that's not useful for you. All right, great to see Jeff Sabelski from Chico, California. All right. All right, so you see from John Barry, open and shut the right pane. So let's say if I'm here, so hitting F3 again brings the mixer into focus. So let me just try to remember. So now, again, now it's in focus. I could, and if I hit, and let's say if I want to see this with the project window over on the other side. So let's say I have bring to front. So I'm here. All right, and then I hit F3, and then tab to navigate. And if I hit Alt Control or Command Option R, I can take that off, and Command Option. So it's tab over, make that to active tab, and then I could cycle back and forth between them. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right. So you see a comment from Daniela. It says special if they cannot be registered with the Cubase registration system. I hope such promotions happen not much often. It's a rare thing that, the companies are generous enough to give free tools. And just because you have a free tool in a promotion, which, most people thought was a really great thing, it doesn't mean that you have to buy it or you don't even have to install it. So we didn't force anyone to install it. It was just a cross promotion thing. Like, you see, companies do cross promotions on many different aspects in industry. It's kind of a standard marketing. All right, so let's say I hit, so you see from John Barry, you see it's not active when you open it. So if I F3 and then just tab, so you have to tab between the 4 sections, but it seems like that's active. And then you could do like that key command if you get a project, bring to front. Let me just see if it's, let's just see if there's, but you could, have that key command. But as soon as you open it, it may not immediately go, it's going to hit the tab key to go to the different sections. So, I mean, it seems to work how I would expect it to. All right, so we see special that there are no promotions for systems that have nothing to do with Cubase, Nuendo, and support more Avid and Pro Tools. So realize that Cubase has been supporting ARA, which is how most people would integrate into into Melodyne. So we've been doing that longer than other tools, and a lot of people use. There's probably more Melodyne users that run Pro Tools because they don't have their own tuning system, so they don't really have an alternative that's included. So. So you see ARA was invented by Steinberg. So I think it was kind of co-developed. It was mostly developed by Ceremony Systems. So we did Rewire. We co-developed with propeller heads at the time. So, but I think ARA may have been mostly Ceremony, and it may like the first company that may have implemented it was PreSonus with Studio One. So. All right, so we see from David M. Hi, Greg. I'm slowly getting to know Wavelab. I do find a wave to edit small compared what you have used to in Cubase. Does anyone find it, or is it just me? So I think you could adjust, the wave file size. So let's say we'll just go ahead and open it up. So let's say if I just wanted to go to this project over here, let's get edit. So, if I wanted to, take away different zones in, we could come over here and, if we want to make stuff bigger or shorter, we could do that. We could also get rid of, we could minimize the different docking bars to make it, larger if needed. So, but, this way we could have, different functions available if you want to see that. So you could, get rid of these different window zones if you wanted to. But I think that, it's helpful to have everything, readily available so you're not kind of hunting throughout the program. All right, so I'm going to go to a couple of questions that were mailed in. So let's get to those. Thank you for all the wonderful questions today. All right, we see we're 127 likes. That's great. Thank you so much. right. So we had a question on the last live stream about how to maintain the control room volume with the MIDI remote between different projects. So I kind of came up with an interesting discovery with this. So let's say we go to our MIDI remote, and I'll come over to, let's say, my Chord. Okay, so if I think what I had found was, let's say I want to take this particular knob, and I wanted to assign this knob to maybe do like my control room volume. So I came over to double-clicked, and we opened up the functions browser on the mapping assistant. So let's come over here to control room, and we'll just set main level. And I'm going to apply the mapping for that. All right, so now we come over, we can see our control room. I'll move this knob here. We can see the values indicating that as we move it. Now I'm going to go to a different project. We'll create empty. Open this up, and we can see that the control room volume persists between different projects there. So I think this is from Benny. So try again to double click on it. And like, I think on Friday's live stream, I just kind of right clicked for picking up volume control, but instead, sorry, just phone call coming in. But try to instead, go to the mapping assistant and go to the control room section, and then just choose level and then apply the mapping. And that seems to stick with the settings there. So if I jump back to our other project, make it active, that setting is now sticks. So try that, Benny. I'll pass that along. All right. So we had a question. I saw this on a Facebook group of people like couldn't figure out, and they were mad that they could only see the sends or the inserts open at once, and they were irritated that they had to jump back and forth. So the question was how to have multiple inspector tabs open. So the trick is just to click on inserts and then hold down the control key and click on sends. And then you could see both inserts and sends open at the same time. And if you wanted to come over to the settings, we could change the order of them. So if you wanted to go to setup, we could now say, okay, I want my sends to be directly below the inserts, and I want my inserts up at the top. And now I could just come over here. We see inserts, hold down Command or Control, and then you could see your sends all at the same time. So if you have your mix console here, we could see all of our faders, see all the inserts and sends on that particular channel without any worries. All right, so I had a question sent in this morning. This is Crown from St. Lucia. It says, I'm using Cubase 12 Pro and some Hallian Sonic Instruments detunes in my projects. Is there anything I could do to get rid of this annoying problem, as I have music to complete for an upcoming carnival season? Your kind assistance would be truly appreciated. So often when I hear that something is drifting out of tune unexpectedly, 9 times out of 10, this would be your MIDI controller. Often, what happens is like the modulation wheel and pitch bend wheel are often on the same kind of board. So what happens is if you use the modulation and pitch bend wheel a lot, sometimes if you use the modulation wheel and the pitch bend, one of them will break, and sometimes it will move the other wheel to transmit data. So I bet if you look in the parts that were in control. So let's say if I was just recording something here real quick. Okay, so let's say all right, so and my bet is that you could come over here and as you're recording, it'll just that when you look at your actual MIDI events, and sometimes you double click on it and you don't see anything weird there, but look to see if there is pitch bend data. And I bet that your controller is accidentally, erroneously transmitting MIDI pitch bend data. So sometimes as controllers wear out, one of the things that often happens is the pitch bend wheel just transmits MIDI pitch bend. If you want to stop that from happening, let's say, I know sometimes if you're in the Caribbean, it's not like you could go to the music store around the corner and get a new MIDI controller as easily. So what you could do is, so I would, first to confirm, take a look to see if there is pitch bend. You could also look at this MIDI event by going into your MIDI editor and go to the list editor. And here you'll see every single MIDI message. So if you see like lots of aftertouch or lots of pitch bend, that means that your controller is spitting that information out. If you want to filter out any pitch bend information from being recorded, if we come here to our input transformer, we could set up a track and let's open up our panel. And what we want to do, let's see if there's a preset controller filtering. Okay, and we're going to say we want to filter. Type is equal to pitch bend. So now as you go to record, all the pitch bend information will be filtered out. So I bet if you look at the MIDI parts where the pitch is changing, that there is pitch bend information that was transmitted by your MIDI controller. So check that out. All right, so we had a question kind of carrying on from Tuesday's live stream, and this was about the T guitar. So I got it installed last night. Okay, so we'll just get this opened up. Bear with me for a second. Instrument gets loaded. All right, so we had a question. One was if we could get the T guitar to kind of play out of time at a different tempo, or is it always going to be locked to the project tempo? Now, a lot of instruments, and you could build up different arpeggiators inside of Cubase that can be tempo synced, or you could turn off tempo sync by default so that it plays kind of, based on milliseconds as opposed to 8th or 16th notes. I haven't found a way in T guitar to turn off, and obviously the design is if we're kind of playing. That as we would adjust the tempo here, so let's say, okay, I want this to be, 96 BPM, that it's going to synchronize with the tempo. So I think if you want to actually play the MIDI parts and have it sound at a slower tempo, that what you're going to have to do is, because this is designed to automatically play in time. So, I realize that sometimes you may not want to have it play out of time. So let's say I'm going to record some MIDI notes here. Right. So I think, let's say if we draw a note in here, not sure why it's not recording, but you may have to render it as an audio file, because it seems like even if we locked the timing of the events, that the instrument itself is kind of hard locked directly into the tempo of the current tempo of the project. So in looking at the editor, I didn't see a way of actually having the particular editor not follow the project tempo. So I will see if I could dig some more into it. And again, this is done by, it's not a Steinberg product. It's sold on the Steinberg marketplace, but it's, done by Acoustic Samples. So maybe if you reach out to them, they might be able to support you a little better than I can, but I didn't see any functions here to change the edit to, some of the different functions. So let's say if we want to go to the zone. So some of this may be hidden by design. If you're building your own instruments, often you can, change sync. But, with this, I think they wanted it to only play back in particular time. A second question in regards to T-guitar was, how to play a particular note, like an inverted note. So let's say I have this set on to left hand strum on. All right, so now when I play a particular, so I'm going to move this particular knob here. So now I play a chord. So, and once we do this, so now I could just play the chord, and it's going to play the chord that's defined when I hit just one single note. So if we have like a G chord, and we could look at the guitar fretboard here. Let's say I play an F chord. All right, so if I want it to be a G with a B in the bass, like an chord inversion, I'm just going to select a B in the bass. And if we look, we're going to see that it's now, as we play this note, that it's going to play the B in the bass. And let's say, okay, I want this to be, major chord. And if I say, okay, I want the D to be the root note. Or if I wanted the G to be the root note. So that's how we could just kind of play different chord inversions. So if you played a G major chord, and if you played instead of GBD, you played BDG, it would still interpret it as a MIDI chord, but you could now just come over and, program the specific chord voicings and play it from a single note if the auto strum is enabled. Okay, so we see this question from David Reuter. When I open up Cubase 12 Pro on my Windows desktop, there is a news section on the left-hand side. On the third panel, there's a free download for Try Cubase 12 demo projects. I've downloaded both projects onto my Windows desktop and extracted the files, but when I try to open the project, I'm confronted with all kinds of error messages for missing files and VSTIs, etc., that I'm unable to resolve. It's great that Steinberg has something like this, because it's always beneficial for me to see close up how other producers manage their projects and sessions, and to actually have projects to study. Can you open the project during the live stream to see if you're getting error messages too, and show me how to resolve the missing samples and other issues in the project? So I downloaded it this morning. And I'm just going to open it like directly from my downloads folder. So we'll come over here. So there's one Cubase 12 project by Austin Hull. So we'll just, so now I'll just open up the file here. All right, and now we'll play.
I'm getting sick of all these dial tones. I'm losing faith by the minute. Thought you would come back, but you didn't. I know I'm getting close to the limit. I hope you're doing fine, but I've had nights and days with no sun. I'm shutting down and losing.
All right, and I'll open up the second project here, see if that opens up fine. So I think it's this project here. We'll just open up the mixed. So it seems like both those opened up without any issues. The one thing, is, if we look at like the instruments that are being used, let's say we go to our VST instruments, they're being used, or maybe, some different effects. They may be using content like the loop libraries that come with Cubase for some of them. But, if we go to, let's say the Steinberg download assistant, David, one thing to check is to see if you have all of the content available. And maybe it's, because, if you download it, it might still be a zipped file. See if you right click and, at that point, if you right click and say extract to here, so maybe it has to be kind of decompressed, all the files, but it seemed to kind of open as expected. But also make sure you have all the content that's available here. I'm not sure if they're using, it doesn't seem like they're using a lot of the loops. There may be some, but it seems like everything opened up for me that was straight from my downloads. So, maybe move it to a different location and extract it in case some of the files just weren't there or they're still compressed. All right, so that's it for questions that were mailed in. Again, you could always email questions in by going to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, just reading through comments here. All right, we see Kenny Jobson just says, thank you for the inspector tip. See PZ136 is also a bass player like myself and has another clef to look at. All right. See Randy Lee just saying undo for mix console. I did not know. It's awesome. So. All right. So you see from Daniela says, have a question from our last Thursday live stream. One of the guys told that he did use an old Cubase interface, but the dongle for the interface did not work anymore. Any solution? So I'm not sure which interface it was. You know, generally the interfaces don't have dongles on them. But if you have any more information, yeah. But so we see a question, can you use VST sound files in other programs, or do I have to resample? So I don't think that they natively open up in other programs, and it's kind of tied to the licensing of Cubase. So if you wanted to use the VST sound files, that's kind of how, you know, they are protected, but you can just simply, you know, render them if you needed to. So, but I don't think that other programs would natively open them up. So just like most programs have plugins that are kind of tied directly to the host application. So all right, so we see Kenny has to take off, so thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question. What is the best way to create MIDI drums from audio? All right, so let's say I want to take this kick here. So what you could do is just double click, and let's go to hit points. Or I'll just do it where I have an instrument loaded up already here. But its principle will be the same. Okay, so you want to use like hit points. So right now I'm going to have a MIDI track that's loaded up here. So when I come to the instrument, we'll just open up the instrument here and okay, so say we're playing, so I want to take my kick drum and turn that into MIDI. So I'm going to double click. Let's go to our hit points. Let's edit hit points. And kind of what we want to do is to just adjust the threshold. So, and as we do this, we'll see this little create tab, and we'll say, let's create MIDI notes. And I'm going to put it onto the first selected track, and I want my kick drums to be C1. So now it's created the MIDI notes. So if I mute the audio kicks, so now we're just hearing just the kicks coming from Groove Agent here. And if I wanted to combine them, so once you kind of figure out the hit points, then click on the Create tab, expand those options. We can create Groove Quantize or create MIDI notes, and you can send it to a new track or to a selected track. And that's really all you'd have to do. All right. See Jeff Sabelski's number 129. All right, and say we're over 131 likes. All right, we see Daniela had to leave, so thanks for joining us. All right. So we see from DDP Music. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to use Control Room just to audition the media search, file browser, loops, and samples? When I turn on Control Room, I get a duplicate master output signal, louder sound. Thanks. So the trick is, what you want to do is, what you will set up is, and this seems counterintuitive at first, is go to your outputs and then make sure that your outputs is just routed to not connected. Otherwise, you're going to be doubling up the sound. So have the output defined. Okay, this is my main stereo out. This is my main 5-1 out, whatever. And just choose for it not to be routed anywhere, and do all the routing through the control room. And then that will kind of work for you without doubling up the sound, and won't be louder. All right, reading through comments more. All right, you see people looking for Pablo. All right, and wonderful to see Sable Winters on. See how we're doing on time. We got about 2 minutes left. See if there's any last minute questions. John Koskins thanking everyone for a very instructive and fun day at the office. So we're glad you could join us. All right, so I see just a quick question from Spawny. So I register my EVO bundle and I get this as a bonus, but I don't see none of these presets. So is that like the Audient Evo interface, or so if you could let me know what the Evo is, that would be helpful, Spawny. All right. All right, so we see David M says loads of stuff to try after this session. All right, Monos is just thanking everyone for a great stream. So it's always a great stream when there's great people asking great questions, and Jazz Dude is always so amazing at responding and helping out. Let's see if we have any more quick questions before we wrap up. Let's see, we have about 1 more minute. All right, so I guess we will. All right, so we'll Monos. We could show electric bass, but I think we just showed it maybe like Tuesday or last week. So there's kind of a walkthrough of that. But if you want to send me an email, there is a tutorial on the Steinberg site. With that, we are just out of time. So I want to thank everyone for great questions, and we'll see everyone back on Tuesday. Thanks for spending your evening, afternoon with us on the live stream. We hope you learned some new great tips and tricks. And everyone, please stay safe and healthy. Take care.